My dad waved the menu and said loudly, "You'll never be able to afford an establishment like this." My siblings laughed. The waiter turned away. And then the restaurant owner came out, hugged me, and said, "Dinner is on the house." At that moment, my father's fork fell to the floor as he realized the restaurant owner was my husband. I adjusted my pearl earrings and inhaled deeply, standing in front of the entrance to the Amber restaurant. My heart was pounding in my throat. Family dinners were always torture, but this one was going to be special. I imagined their faces when they learned the truth, and the thought made my knees tremble slightly. The glass doors of the restaurant slid open silently. Inside, soft lights burned, and the scent of truffles and fresh pastries wafted through the air. My receptionist, Liz, smiled at me from the welcome desk. She knew exactly what was going to happen tonight, but maintained a professional appearance. "Good evening, Mrs. Foster. Your guests have arrived." "Thank you, Liz." I nodded appreciatively. Mrs. Foster. I still couldn't get used to my new last name, even though Ethan and I had been married for 4 years. I saw them right away at the best table by the window, overlooking the city at night. Dad sat back as straight as a pole, squaring his shoulders and glancing at the other diners like he was assessing their bank accounts. Mom clutched a napkin in her hands, crumpling the perfectly ironed linen. Trent, my older brother, was constantly checking his phone, and Aviva, my younger sister, was meticulously studying the wine list. They hadn't changed one bit. "The Hollister family is all here. Minus Marine at last," Aviva said theatrically. "We thought you were lost." "Sorry, traffic," I lied, but I'd been in the car for 20 minutes, just trying to catch my breath. "You're always late," my father shook his head. "How old are you, Marine? 32?" And I still had no discipline. I swallowed my usual bitterness and sat down in the empty chair. Michael, one of our best employees, approached the table with perfect poise. "Good evening. May I offer you something from the aperitifs?" "A glass of your best champagne," I said, knowing that we served Dom Perignon from the 2008 vintage. Michael smiled faintly. He had been with us since we opened and knew exactly what was going on. "How can you afford it?" Trent snorted. "You're just a receptionist at some cafe. I invited you, so it's my treat," I replied calmly. My father took the menu and began to study it. His eyebrows rose higher and higher until they were hidden beneath his neatly arranged gray bangs. $180 Kobe steak? Truffle risotto? Lobster baked in champagne sauce?" He defiantly turned the page. "You could never afford such an establishment." Those words cut me, despite all my preparation. 32 years of such phrases, and each one left an invisible scar. Trent chuckled. "Dad, let her dream. Maybe she won the lottery." Aviva giggled, covering her mouth with her palm. "Or finally found a rich sponsor." Mom just lowered her eyes, studying the pattern on the tablecloth. As always, the silent Bridget who never stood up for me. "Actually, I started, but I stopped when I saw him. Ethan was walking toward our table, and it took my breath away, even though we'd been married for so many years. In his perfectly fitting navy blue suit, with that special smile that was always reserved for me. His dark hair was damp. He must have just come out of the kitchen, where he personally oversaw the preparation of every dish. The waiter stepped aside respectfully. Trent pulled away from the phone. Aviva raised her eyebrows. Her father frowned, not sure what was going on. "I apologize for the intrusion," Ethan said in his deep voice, with the slight accent I loved so much. "I wanted to personally greet my beloved wife's family." He leaned over and put his arm around my shoulders, kissing the top of my head. "Dinner tonight is on the house," he added with a smile. "You can order whatever you want. Our chef Julian will prepare something special for you." The silence at the table became absolute. I could see my father slowly realizing what he had heard. His eyes widened, his mouth dropped open. The fork he was holding slipped from his fingers and fell to the marble floor with a loud clink. "Your wife?" He finally squeezed out. "Yes, Mr. Hollister." Ethan held out his hand to shake. "Minus Ethan Foster. Maureen and I have been married for 4 years. I own Amber's and 2 other restaurants in town. Mother inhaled sharply. Trent froze with the phone in his hand. Aviva covered her mouth with her palm, but this time not with laughter. But, Dad stammered. This had never happened to him before. Why didn't we know? You never asked. I finally found my voice. You were always too busy telling me what a loser I was. Marin, what nonsense, my father said indignantly, but his voice sounded uncertain. Dash, we've always supported you. Have we? I raised an eyebrow. When was the last time you asked me how I was doing? Where I'm working? Who I'm seeing? Do you remember anything about me other than the fact that I'm your eternal disappointment? There was a heavy pause. I felt Ethan squeeze my shoulder, giving me strength. I suggest we all drink champagne, he said diplomatically. And start this evening over. I've heard so much about the Hollister family. Have you heard of us? Aviva perked up, instantly turning on her charm mode. Of course, Ethan answered. Maureen has told me all about you. He emphasized the word everything, and I saw my father swallow. Yes, dear Daddy, he knows how you've treated me all these years. The situation was saved by Michael returning with a bottle of champagne in a silver ice bucket. I have to check something in the kitchen, I said, standing up. I'll be there in a minute. I needed a few seconds to collect myself. I walked across the hall, nodding to familiar visitors, and pushed open the door labeled Staff Only. In the small hallway, I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. I'd spent years visualizing this moment. How many nights had I laid awake imagining the look on my father's face when he found out that his loser daughter was actually co-owner of 3 successful restaurants, that I'd actually helped Ethan turn his grandfather's inheritance into a thriving business, that I actually conceptualized Amber's from the menu to the interior. But now that it was finally happening, I felt a strange emptiness. I thought it would be satisfying, triumphant, maybe even make my father proud of me. But the look of shock on his face gave me none of those things. Only the realization of how many years I had spent trying to earn the approval of a man who only saw me as a reflection of his expectations, not a living person. Now, standing in the hallway of the restaurant Ethan and I had created from scratch, I felt an invisible weight fall from my shoulders. I'd finally shown my father who I really was. But I didn't do it for his approval. I did it for me. For that little girl inside of me who always wanted to prove she was worth something. I took a deep breath, adjusted my dress, and walked back into the hall. To my family who finally got to see the real me. To the table where my husband was now being inundated with questions from people who had never really taken an interest in my life. To the beginning of a conversation I'd been putting off for far too long. I was born in a suburb of Boston, in a house with a white picket fence and neatly trimmed lilac bushes. Our house always looked immaculate, just the way my father wanted it. Garland Hollister believed that appearance was the first thing that spoke of a person, and only excellent things were to be said about the Hollister family. My father was a lead engineer for a major construction company. He designed bridges that connected the coasts, but he had never been able to build a bridge to his own daughter's heart. Every morning, he left with a perfectly ironed shirt, an expensive briefcase, and an unshakable confidence that the world was made for people like him, driven, rational, and ambitious. His mom, Bridget, a former English literature teacher, left her job after Trent was born. Family is more important than career, she used to say, but I often noticed her looking wistfully at the bookshelves littered with the classics she once taught. Her eyes sometimes flashed with a longing for something lost. Trent was the firstborn son and his father's pride. He received only excellent grades, was captain of the school swim team, and went to Princeton on a full scholarship. Every Sunday at family dinner, my father made us listen to Trent's new accomplishments as if we could have forgotten about them during the week. Aviva, my younger sister, was the epitome of femininity and grace. She'd been doing ballet since she was 4 years old, was the school prom queen by 16, and her personal Instagram had thousands of followers. Her mother couldn't get enough of her beauty, and her father couldn't get enough of how cleverly she could charm his business partners at corporate dinners. And then there was me, the middle child. No outstanding academic success like Trent, no dazzling beauty like Aviva. Average. Average grades, average height, average looks. I loved to draw and dreamed of a career as an illustrator, but my father called it a pointless hobby. "Marine, you can't live on drawing your whole life," he'd say when he found my sketchbooks. "You need a real profession." In 8th grade, I won second place in a city competition for young artists. My art teacher, Mr. Wilson, said I had real talent and recommended a specialized art school. "It's a waste of money," my father cut me off when I showed him the booklet. "You're not gifted enough for a professional career. You should concentrate on math. You got a C in math." I remember sitting in my room looking at the competition diploma and feeling something inside breaking. Maybe that was the first crack in my self-esteem that eventually turned into an abyss. Maybe that's when I started to believe that my dad was right, and I really wasn't anything special. My mom found me there, sitting on the floor amongst my scattered drawings. "He just wants a stable future for you, honey," she said, sitting down next to me. "Art is so unpredictable. What if it's the only thing I'm good at?" I asked, not looking up. Mom sighed and stroked my hair. "You're good at a lot of things, Marin. It's just, maybe you should find something more practical, something that Daddy will like." That's the way it's always been. Mom loved me, I knew it. She'd leave little notes on my pillow with quotes from my favorite books, bake blueberry muffins when I was having a bad day, sometimes sneakily buy me art supplies. But she never came between me and my father, never defended my dreams. Her love was always quiet, almost imperceptible, as if she was afraid that if she loved me too loudly, my father would notice and he wouldn't like it. In high school, I found my refuge in cooking club. Cooking turned out to be something between a science, which my father appreciated, and an art, which I loved. To my surprise, I discovered that I had a pretty good taste and sense of composition. My home economics teacher, Mrs. Parker, often praised my dishes for their presentation. "You turn food into a painting, Marine," she used to say. When it came time to choose a college, my father had already decided everything for me. "Economics," he announced at dinner, placing an NYU brochure in front of me. "It's practical, versatile, and always in demand. I have connections in the financial sector, and I'll get you an internship in your 3rd year." "But I'd like to study design or culinary arts," I said timidly. My father laughed the way one laughs at a child's naivete. "Minus Marine, be realistic. You're not Trent or Aviva. You need a profession that will provide for you even with your limited abilities." Limited abilities. These words haunted me all 4 years of college, where I mechanically attended lectures in macroeconomics and financial analysis, dreaming of something else entirely. I got my satisfactory and good grades, never reaching the excellent grades that Trent made so easy. Every call home turned into an interrogation. "What grades? Why aren't you doing better? Are you trying hard enough?" After graduation, I was supposed to start working at my father's friend's firm. It was all arranged. My future was scheduled without my input, just like my entire life up to that point. But something in me resisted. Perhaps it was 4 years of repressed desires. Perhaps it was fatigue from the constant feeling that I would never be good enough. Or maybe it was just the moment of clarity when I realized that if I didn't turn now, I would forever be in the shadow of my father's expectations. Instead of interviewing at the investment firm, I went to interview at a small cafe called Noon in a bohemian neighborhood of the city. It attracted me with its cozy atmosphere, walls hung with works by local artists, and a vacancy for a receptionist. "I have no experience," I honestly admitted to the owner, an elderly woman named Eleonora. "But I'm a fast learner, and I really want to work here." Eleonora looked at me carefully over her glasses. "Why here? With a degree in economics, you could find something more lucrative." I didn't know what to say. I couldn't say that this was the first time I'd ever done something against my father's wishes, that I love the creative atmosphere this place has, that I feel like I can breathe. "I love art," I finally said. and good food. I I feel like this is a place where I could be me. Eleanor smiled, and I was accepted. When I informed my family of my decision, an uproar broke out. My father threw his fork on the table with such force that it bounced off and fell to the floor. The first time I'd seen his impeccable manners crack. You turned down a position at Bloomfield Investments? His voice was quiet, but that made it even more frightening. For a job as a waitress? Administrator, I corrected, surprised at my own audacity. And that's what I want. What you want? He laughed bitterly. Marin, you've always wanted the wrong thing. First those meaningless drawings, now this. I spent thousands of dollars on your education so you could serve coffee? I'm not gonna serve coffee. I'm gonna run the cafe. I'm gonna work with the vendors. I'm gonna schedule. Don't you dare interrupt me! He slammed his fist on the table, and everyone jumped. This is humiliating. Garland Hollister's daughter serves at a diner. It's just further proof of your inadequacy. Her mother looked down at her plate as if she could find a solution to the conflict there. Trent rolled his eyes. Typical Marine, screwing things up again. Aviva hid behind her phone, pretending she wasn't here. And I stood there, feeling tears come to my throat, but not letting them spill over. Not this time. I'm 22 years old, Dad. I'm going to live my life. If you walk out the door, you don't have to come back, he said quietly, almost mundanely. But every word was like a whiplash. I looked at my mother for support, but she shook her head helplessly. I could see the fear in her eyes, the fear of the man she had married, the fear she could never overcome. That night, I packed my bags and rented a tiny room in an apartment with 2 roommates. I had almost no money, just what I'd managed to put away from my part-time job in college. But, in a strange way, I felt freer than ever. I'd worked at noon for 3 months before I met him. Ethan Foster, the new chef Eleanor had hired to revamp the menu. He walked into the kitchen in a white uniform, with a mop of dark hair, and the confident smile of a man who knew his worth. Hi, I'm Ethan, he said, extending his hand to me. You must be Marin? Eleanor said you were in charge of procurement. His handshake was firm, and his gaze was direct and interested. It was the first time anyone had ever looked at me as if they really wanted to see me. Yes, that's me, I replied, suddenly realizing I was still holding his hand. What do you need for the new dishes? Ethan smiled, and I felt something new, as if a long-sleeping part of me had suddenly woken up. I need a lot of things, he said. But first, fresh organic herbs, real Parmesan, and someone who wasn't afraid to experiment. I didn't know at that moment that this meeting would change my whole life. That this ambitious young penniless cook with big dreams would not only become my husband, but also the man who would help me find my voice. The voice my father had forced me to keep quiet for so long. A week after Ethan showed up at the cafe, I received my first text from my mother. Short and tentative. How are you? Dad's still mad. Miss you? I didn't respond. I wasn't ready. The wounds were too fresh and my new freedom too fragile. A month later, Ethan asked me out on a date. We didn't go to a restaurant, as I'd expected, but to a farmer's market, where he excitedly showed me the best seasonal produce, explained the difference between varieties of olive oil, and taught me how to choose the perfect avocado. It's not just the technique that counts, he said, holding a bunch of basil and inhaling its aroma. It's about loving the ingredients, respecting their nature. It's like an artist who knows his colors. I used to paint, I confessed out of the blue. You did? His eyes lit up. Will you show me someday? I shook my head. I gave it up a long time ago. It was a stupid hobby. Who told you it was stupid? He asked, and his voice became serious. My father. He didn't think I had any talent. Ethan frowned. What do you think? That simple question caught me off guard. What do I think? I was so rarely asked that, I didn't know how to answer. Yeah, I don't know, I said honestly. It's been so long since I've painted. Then maybe you should try again? He smiled, And there was no condescension in that smile, only genuine interest. Sometimes we give up on things not because they don't suit us, but because someone has convinced us they do. I stared at him, feeling something inside me, some long-locked door slowly opening. My father was right about one thing. I was indeed serving in a diner. But there, amid the smells of freshly ground coffee and pastries, amid conversations about art and taste, next to a man who looked at me and saw me not as a copy of my sister and brother, but as something special, I was beginning to find my real self. He taught me how to cook authentic Italian dishes according to his grandfather's recipes, and I timidly started drawing again, first sketching for the afternoon menu, and then just for myself. Ethan rented a small apartment above the bakery, and the smell of fresh bread woke us up in the mornings. The apartment was tiny, with a leaky bathroom ceiling and creaky floorboards, but it was the first real home for me. A place where no one judged me for improperly folded towels or not getting high enough grades. "You'd be horrified at where I grew up," Ethan told me once, as we sat on his couch and ate spaghetti straight from the pot. A trailer on the outskirts of Chicago, 6 people in 2 rooms. My mom worked 2 jobs. My dad left when I was 5. "How did you become a chef?" I asked, surprised that despite such a start, he always remained so optimistic. "Grandpa." He worked as a cook at a small Italian restaurant. When Mom couldn't find someone to leave me with, I would spend my days in his kitchen. He used to say that good food was a way to show people you cared about them, even if you didn't have money for gifts. I realized that, for the first time, I had met a man whose life was even more complicated than mine, but who didn't let circumstances break him. After 6 months, Ethan asked me to move in with him, and after another 3 months, he asked me to marry him. "I know it's quick," he said, holding out a simple silver ring to me. "And I know I can't offer you much right now, but I promise that one day we'll have our own restaurant, and a house, and everything you dream of." I said yes without even thinking. For the first time in my life, I was sure of my decision. When I called my mother to tell her the news, her first question was, "What will my father say?" "I don't care," I replied, surprised at how true that was. "I'm getting married, Mom, to a man who loves me for who I am." There was silence on the phone, and then Mom said softly, "I'm happy for you, honey. I really am." Our wedding was modest. We just signed at City Hall, and then had a small reception at the Nooner, which Eleanor had closed for the day just for us. Only my mother came, furtively casting glances at the door, as if expecting my father to burst in and stop everything. Aviva sent a text apologizing and a gift card to an expensive store. There was nothing from Trent or her father, but coworkers from the coffee shop were there, Ethan's friends from the culinary community, and it felt right. We danced to old jazz tunes, ate cake that Ethan had baked himself, and I realized I was truly happy for the first time in a long time. 2 months after the wedding, the unexpected happened. Ethan's grandfather passed away, leaving his grandson a small inheritance. Not a fortune, but enough to start his own business. "I want to open a restaurant," Ethan said, looking at the check in his hands. "A small one, but my own. What do you think?" "It's risky," I answered, remembering the statistics of restaurant business failures I'd studied in college. Most new restaurants close in the first year. Most, but not all. He squeezed my hand. "We could do this together. I know the kitchen. You know the numbers and management. You could do the interior. You have great taste." I hesitated. My father always said I was incapable of serious work, that I took the easy way out, that I was doomed to mediocrity. "What if we lose everything?" I asked. "Then we'll start over," Ethan answered simply. "Together." And we took a risk. We found a small space in an up-and-coming neighborhood where the rent wasn't exorbitant yet. We worked day and night, turning the shabby space of the former clothing store into a cozy restaurant. I remembered my artistic skills, painting the walls, choosing color schemes, creating a menu that was both elegant and affordable. Oliva is what we named our first restaurant. Mediterranean cuisine with Ethan's signature touches. I was in charge of purchasing, accounting, personnel, everything that was not directly related to the kitchen. And to my surprise, I found that I loved it. The economics degree I hated so much was suddenly useful. The first month, we were barely making ends meet. By the second, we were starting to break even. And by the sixth, we had regular customers and the first positive reviews in the local press. One day, when we were closing the restaurant after a particularly successful evening, Ethan put his arm around me and said, "See? We're doing this. Together." And I felt pride. Pure, unadulterated pride that didn't require anyone else's approval. Relations with my family remained strained. My mom called occasionally, asking how I was doing, but she never mentioned the restaurant, like it was something shameful, something best left unsaid. I knew my father was still angry about my rebellion. One day, I happened to meet my parents at a town festival. My mom hugged me, and my father nodded coldly and asked, "Still playing restaurateur?" "We're doing fine, Dad," I replied, trying to speak evenly. "You can stop by and see for yourself." "I don't have time for the experiments of culinary students." He cut me off and turned away. Mom shrugged helplessly, unable to take my side as always. By the end of the first year, Oliva was making a steady profit. We were able to hire additional staff and were thinking about expanding. Our small team became a family, one where I was valued for my decisions and ideas. The fateful day came in the middle of our second year of business. It was a busy Friday night. All the tables were occupied. Ethan was witching in the kitchen. I was helping the waiters when I heard a familiar voice, loud, cocky, condescending. Trent was sitting at a table with two coworkers. Expensive suits, expensive watches, loud laughter. They were already slightly tipsy. I froze, hoping my brother wouldn't notice me. But that's not what fate had in store. "Hey, waiter!" Trent snapped his fingers, summoning Jason, our new employee. "What's this slop?" I asked for a dry white wine, not this sour stuff. Jason, a young guy who had recently started working for us, was confused. "Sorry, sir, this is Chablis, just like you ordered." "Are you gonna argue with me?" Trent raised his voice. "Get the manager." I took a deep breath and walked over to the table. "Something wrong with the wine, sir?" Trent looked up and froze for a moment. "Marin? What are you doing here?" "I work here," I replied, feeling the blood rush to my face. "Well, this is my restaurant." His coworkers were watching us with interest. "Is it yours?" Trent laughed. "So you're still playing businesswoman? Dad said you'd taken a job at some diner, but I thought it was temporary." "It's not a diner." My voice was quieter than I wanted it to be. "We have great reviews and—" Yeah, of course." He dismissed me. "Since you're the boss, bring us a bottle of something decent, and tell your uneducated chef that scallops should be fried on both sides, not just one." I felt the familiar sensation return, like I was a little girl being told off for a bad grade. I wanted to disappear, to apologize, to do whatever it took to get my brother to stop talking that way. "I'll get another wine," I mumbled and retreated to the bar. Ethan, who had heard the conversation, came out of the kitchen. I saw his face darken when he noticed my condition. "What's going on?" he asked. "It's my brother," I whispered. "With his coworkers. He doesn't know you're my husband. Please, let's just serve them, and that's it." Ethan frowned, but nodded and went back into the kitchen. I brought Trent another bottle of wine, which he indulgently approved. I tried to stay away from their table all evening, assigning service to another waiter. When they finally left, leaving no tip and loudly commenting on the mediocre food, I was relieved. But it was short-lived. "What was that?" Ethan asked. When we closed the restaurant and were alone. "What are you talking about?" I diligently wiped the already clean glasses. "About how you let your brother treat you and our employees? He acted like an arrogant jerk, and you just, bent over." "He's always like that," I shrugged. It was better to just not argue. "Marin." Ethan took the glass from my hands gently. "This is our restaurant. We built it from the ground up. You shouldn't bow down to anyone, especially a man who doesn't respect you or our labor. You don't understand. I looked away. This is my family. They make you feel like you're nothing. His voice became harsher. I saw the way you shrank away from your brother. You've become a different person. Scared. Insecure. That's not you, Marin. You don't know what I am. I suddenly burst into a rage. Maybe that scared little girl is the real me. No. He shook his head. The real you is the woman who runs a successful restaurant, who finds the best suppliers and negotiates the best prices, who designed an accounting system that saved us thousands of dollars, who isn't afraid to take risks and dream. I was silent, tears welling up in my eyes. You need to deal with this, Marin, Ethan added more gently. Otherwise, they'll always have power over you. They'll always take your power. I couldn't sleep for a long time that night. Ethan's words rang in my head. I thought about our restaurant, how it was thriving against all odds, about the new project we'd been discussing, a more ambitious restaurant downtown, with signature cuisine and a sophisticated atmosphere. And I thought about my family, about how they never believed in me, how my father always assumed my defeat, how my mother never stood up for me, how my brother and sister thought I was a failure, not worthy of the Hollister family name. By morning, I had made my decision. You're right, I told Ethan over breakfast. I need to put a stop to this. When we open Amber and get the first critical acclaim, I'll invite them all over for dinner. Let them see what we've accomplished. What I've accomplished. Ethan smiled and squeezed my hand. You'll do fine. I'll be there for you. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of fear and determination. Amber was going to be our triumph. An elegant restaurant with Ethan's signature cuisine and an interior designed entirely by me. A place that even my father wouldn't have been able to call a diner. I imagined his face when he realized he'd been wrong about me all these years. That I wasn't a failure. That I'd always been worthy of the name Hollister, even when I changed it to Foster. After that night at Amber, it was like my life split into before and after. It was as if someone had broken a crystal vase, and now I was trying to figure out which pieces to keep and which to throw away forever. Mom was the first to call. The next morning, when I was still in bed, trying to make sense of what had happened. Maureen, honey, that was unexpected. Her voice sounded worried. Why didn't you tell us you owned such a beautiful restaurant? Did you ask? I answered question for question. There was a silence, during which I knew my mother was realizing the bitter truth. Neither of them was really interested in my life. Forgive us, she said at last. Especially your father. He didn't mean to hurt you yesterday. He never means to, Mom. But he always does. He's just shocked. And a little, I think. Proud, though he'll never admit it. I grinned. Garland Hollister and pride in my accomplishments were two things that never met in the same sentence. How did you meet Ethan? Mom asked, clearly trying to change the subject. I told her the short version of our story. No pain, no resentment toward the family that didn't show up for the wedding, just the facts. She listened, occasionally interrupting me with surprised exclamations. It was like she was learning about her own daughter's life for the first time. Well, she was. Aviva was the next to show up, sending me a text asking me to meet her for lunch. I want to hear all about your business, she wrote with lots of exclamation points. My sister, who had barely remembered I existed before, suddenly wanted to hear all the details. I declined, citing busyness. I wasn't prepared for her superficial interest. There was no word from Trent. It was as if his brother had decided that if he ignored what had happened, it would cease to be real. Or maybe he was ashamed of the way he'd behaved at Olive, not knowing I owned the restaurant. Dad was the longest silent. I didn't hear from him for a week, not a call or a text. And then he showed up at Amber at lunchtime, when the restaurant was almost empty. He sat at the far table and ordered a business lunch. I noticed him at once, that straight back, that critical gaze assessing every detail of the interior. My heart beat faster, my mouth went dry. So many years had passed, and the reaction was still the same: fear, eagerness to please, desperate hope for approval. "Your father's here," Ethan said quietly, stepping toward me. "Do you want me to talk to him?" I shook my head. "No, I'll be fine." I gathered my courage and walked over to his table. "Hello, Dad." He looked up from the menu. "You have a nice place." Good location, decent decor. It was almost a compliment coming from him. "Thank you." I sat down across from him. "I designed it myself." "Really?" He raised his eyebrows in surprise. "I thought you'd hired professionals. It's always the same. Any success I have must be attributed to someone else's help, not my own efforts." "No, Dad, I did it. Just like the menu, and the business plan, and the supply chart. Dash. Dash." He said quietly. "And how long have you and this young man been together?" "Minus Ethan. His name is Ethan. We've been married for 4 years." He flinched, as if struck by a blow. "4 years? And you've never once— You haven't told me?" I finished for him. "Did you ask?" There was a long pause. For the first time, my father looked confused. "I always wanted the best for you, Maureen," he said at last. "Maybe I was too demanding, but only because I saw your potential." I almost laughed. How many times had he told me about limited abilities? How many times had he made me feel like I wasn't good enough? "Please don't." I shook my head. "Let's at least be honest with each other now." My father straightened, his face impenetrable again. "I didn't come here to fight. I just wanted to see your restaurant." "Our restaurant," I corrected him. "Mine and Ethan's," he nodded. But I could see that he was having a hard time accepting this reality. The reality that his loser daughter was a successful person. After he left, I stood at the window for a long time, watching him get into his expensive car. Conflicting feelings raged inside. Relief that he had come, disappointment that he had never really been able to be happy for me, and a strange, unexpected pity for him. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, putting his arm around my shoulders. "I don't know," I answered honestly. Part of me still wanted his approval. It's like there's a little girl inside who still needs her daddy to say, "Good job, I'm proud of you." "That's okay," Ethan said. "But Marin, you need to decide how much space in your life you're willing to give to people who can't accept you for who you are. Who can't accept you for who you are." That night, I made an appointment with a psychologist. After a long search, I found Rachel Thompson, a marriage and family therapist whose profile and approach seemed close to my own. Our first meeting was awkward. I sat in a cozy chair in her office and didn't know where to begin. "Tell me what brought you to me," Rachel gently suggested. And I did. My childhood in the shadow of my father's expectations. My mother who loved me but couldn't protect me. My brother and sister who thought I was a failure. Ethan who helped me believe in myself. And the dinner that changed everything. "I should feel triumph," I said. But instead, I feel empty. And I'm still waiting for their approval, even though I know I shouldn't need it. Rachel nodded understandingly. "You have a classic case of what we call good girl syndrome. You grew up trying to conform to your parents' expectations, especially your father's. Your self-esteem was tied to his approval. And even now, when you're objectively successful, you still seek that approval." "How do I stop?" I asked. "It's a process," she replied. "But the first step is to realize that you are no longer that little girl, and your father no longer has power over you unless you give it up yourself." I spent the next few months working with Rachel, addressing deeply ingrained patterns of my own behavior. At the same time, our business continued to grow. Amber's received a rave review in a major culinary magazine, and suddenly reservations were hard to come by, even weeks in advance. Investors suggested that we open a second restaurant under the same brand in a neighboring city. Ethan and I discussed the proposal at length. "It's a risk," I said, analyzing the numbers. "But a calculated risk. We already have a reputation. We have a team. We have experience." "So we'll take the risk?" Minus Ethan smiled. I nodded, feeling a confidence I had never felt before. That confidence grew in me with every session with Rachel, with every successful business decision, with every day with a man who believed in me more than I believed in myself. But one conversation still loomed. A conversation I'd been putting off but knew was necessary. For me, not for him. I called my father and invited him to lunch. Not to a restaurant, but to a cafe on neutral territory. He agreed, sounding surprised. We met on Wednesday in a quiet French bistro. He arrived right on time, impeccably dressed as always. "Ethan's not with you?" he asked after the greeting. "No, I wanted to talk to you alone." We ordered, and I gathered my thoughts. Rachel had helped me prepare for this conversation, but it was still scary. "Dad, I want to talk about us, about what our relationship has been like over the years." He frowned. "Marin, if this is about that dinner again." "No, it's not about him. It's about everything." I took a deep breath. "Dad, I've spent my whole life trying to earn your love and approval. I felt like I'd never be good enough. Not as smart as Trent. Not as beautiful as Aviva. Just not enough." "That's not true." He pressed his lips together. "I've always loved you. Maybe you have. But you never showed it. You criticized my every decision, mocked my dreams, made me feel inferior." His face became hard. "I wanted you to strive for more. It's a tough world, Marin. I was preparing you for it." "No, Papa. You didn't prepare you. You broke you. You know what I learned in therapy? That my constant insecurity, my need to please everyone, my fear of speaking my mind, it's all a result of your upbringing." "Therapy?" He almost spit the word out. "You're seeing a therapist and blaming me for your problems?" "I'm not blaming. I'm just telling the truth that I've been holding in for too long. And you know what? Despite all that, I've built a successful business. I have a wonderful husband who loves me for who I am. I have friends who appreciate me for who I am, not my accomplishments." My father sat silent, his fingers drumming on the table, a sign of irritation I knew well. "What do you want me to do?" he finally asked. "An apology? An admission of error?" I did what I thought was right. "I don't want anything from you, Dad," I said calmly. "I just want you to know that I'm no longer that scared little girl desperately seeking your approval. I've grown up, and if you want to be a part of my life, you're going to have to accept me for who I am." He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Something flashed in his eyes. Surprise, respect. But it was gone quickly. "You've changed," he said. "Yes," I nodded. I had. We finished lunch in relative silence. No loud confessions, no emotional reconciliations. He didn't say he was proud of me. He didn't admit his mistakes. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care. As we said goodbye outside, he touched my shoulder awkwardly, a gesture as close to a hug as he could manage. "Your restaurant is really good," he said. "That sauce on the steak. Unusual." Coming from him, it was almost a confession. But unlike the past me, the present me didn't feel the euphoria of that crumb of approval. I just nodded. "Thanks, Dad. I'll tell Ethan it's his recipe." We went our separate ways. I walked down the street and felt my breathing getting easier with each step. It was like the heavy weight I'd been carrying my whole life was finally starting to dissolve. That conversation didn't fix our relationship. It didn't make my father suddenly become loving and understanding. But it freed me from the chains of the past, from my constant need for his approval. I pulled out my phone and texted Ethan, "Done. Going home. Home, a place where I was loved simply for who I was. To a place where my opinion mattered. To a place we created together. Not just a restaurant, but our world, free of toxic expectations and conditional love. To a place where broken shards of crystal were transformed into a mosaic of a new, better life." A year passed like a single day. Amber's second restaurant opened in downtown Philadelphia, and the reservation line stretched a month ahead. Ethan and I were torn between the two establishments, but enjoyed every minute of this creative chaos. Gourmet magazine named us one of the 30 best new restaurants in the country, and local critics sang the praises of Ethan's signature dishes. Things have changed in my personal life, too. After that conversation with my father, it was as if an invisible weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I no longer woke up thinking that I wasn't living up to someone else's expectations. I didn't analyze every decision I made, trying to see if Garland Hollister would approve of it. I just lived, my life, with my mistakes and my victories. My father and I rarely spoke. Occasionally, he would call and ask how I was doing, but the conversations remained superficial. He was never able to admit he'd been wrong all these years, couldn't say he was proud of me. But in a strange way, it didn't hurt me anymore. Rachel helped me realize that I couldn't change my father, I could only change my attitude toward his approval. Mom, to my surprise, blossomed. After that memorable dinner, she visited me more often, and a couple months later, she confessed that our meetings were the only joy in her life. "Your father is always so demanding," she said over a cup of tea. "I probably shouldn't say this, but sometimes I feel like I'm suffocating." Those words were a revelation. It was the first time my mother had allowed herself to criticize my father. I saw her as a woman with her own desires and frustrations, not just her husband's weak shadow. When we opened a second restaurant, my mother offered to help out, to greet guests a few nights a week. She had natural charm and perfect manners. Patrons adored her, especially older couples with whom she could discuss classic literature. "I feel like I'm back in my youth when I was teaching," she once confessed. "Talking to people, being able to help, it gives me energy." Trent remained aloof. We only crossed paths at family gatherings, which were now rare. He nodded at me, asked formal questions, but in his eyes I saw a mixture of misunderstanding and perhaps envy. My older brother, the golden boy who was used to being the best at everything, couldn't accept that his loser sister was more successful than he was. With Aviva, strangely enough, the relationship began to mend. After a few awkward attempts at bonding, mostly motivated by her interest in my rich husband, we found common ground. She confessed that she had always envied my freedom. "You're not afraid to be yourself," she said over a glass of wine at the Amber. "I spend my life playing the role of the girl my parents want me to be." Those words made me look at our family dynamic in a new way. Maybe I wasn't the only one suffering from paternal expectations. Maybe behind the perfect facade of golden boy and beautiful daughter lurked the same fears and insecurities. But the real test awaited us at the end of the year. A large restaurant chain, Bistro Elite, opened an establishment 2 blocks away from our first Amber. With a huge marketing budget, press connections, and dumping prices, they quickly poached some of our customers. Ethan and I didn't panic. Quality always wins in the long run. But when strangely similar negative reviews of our cuisine started appearing online, it became clear that this was a planned attack. "They want to destroy us," Ethan said, looking at another fake review. "It's not fair competition." We tried to fight back. We invited famous bloggers, organized tastings for journalists, but the wave of negativity did not subside. And then the unexpected happened. My mom called me in the early morning. "Marin, I need to talk to you." Not over the phone. We met in the park. She fidgeted with the strap of her bag, looking around. "I know who's behind the campaign against you," she finally said. "It's Robert Kingsley, the owner of Bistro Elite. He's an old friend of your father's. They play golf together." I froze. "Are you saying Dad's involved in this?" Mom shook her head quickly. No. Your father doesn't even know. But we had dinner last night with Kingsley and his wife, and he was bragging about how clever he was at squeezing out the smaller competitors. He didn't know that I'm your mother. Garland never talks about his family to business associates." She pulled her phone out of her bag and showed me photos. Screenshots of Kingsley's correspondence with a PR agency specializing in black PR. His phone was left on the table when he and your father left for the office. I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't let him destroy what you and Ethan had created. In that moment, I saw my mother in a new way. Not a weak-willed woman, but someone with an inner strength she'd hidden for too long. We went to the lawyers and the restaurant association with evidence of foul play. Kingsley had to publicly apologize, and his reputation suffered far more than ours. Bistro Elite closed 3 months later. After that incident, Mom started coming over more often. Sometimes she came alone, without her father. We talked about books, about life, about everything but past hurts. It was like we were getting to know each other all over again. But the real shocker awaited me on a typical Tuesday when I checked the accounts in the Amber office. Casey, our hostess, peeked through the door. "Your father, alone." I found him at a corner table. He looked oddly unsure, without his usual commanding aura. "Dash, Dad? Is something wrong?" "No," he coughed. "Just thought I'd stop by for lunch." I nodded, still not understanding the reason for his visit. "What are you ordering?" He studied the menu longer than usual, then looked up. "Do you have blueberry pancakes with maple syrup?" My heart skipped a beat. Blueberry pancakes are my favorite dish from my childhood. When I was 12, I tried to make them for my dad for his birthday. The batter didn't rise, and the pancakes turned out flat and rubbery. My father looked at my cooking and said, "Marin, you clearly have no talent for cooking. Better leave it to the professionals." I ran to my room and sobbed all evening. "No," I said, overcome with emotion. "It's not on our menu." "Too bad." He looked disappointed. "You know, I was just remembering the other day when you tried to make them when you were a kid. I was unfair back then." That was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from Garland Hollister. "Wait here," I said, and headed for the kitchen. Ethan looked at me in surprise as I started mixing the batter for the pancakes. "What are you doing?" "We have a full room waiting for orders." "This is important," was all I said. 20 minutes later, I placed a plate of fluffy pancakes in front of my father, studded with fresh blueberries and drizzled with maple syrup. "It's off the menu," I said. "But it's an exception for you." He stared at the plate for a long moment, then carefully cut off a piece and put it in his mouth. His eyes widened. "They're perfect, just like your grandmother used to make." "I know," I smiled. "It's her recipe. My mom gave me her cookbook last year." We sat in silence while he ate. There were no long declarations of love, no heartfelt apologies. Just an older man enjoying a dish from his childhood, prepared by a daughter he never really understood. And that was enough. When he was done, he left an overly large tip on the table and patted me awkwardly on the shoulder. "You did good, Marin. You built something worthwhile," and walked away straight and proud as ever. But something had changed. I could feel it, and I think he did too. That evening, I stood at the window of our apartment above the second Amber, watching the hustle and bustle of the city below. Ethan hugged me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "About recipes," I answered. "About how we're all searching for the perfect recipe for life, a list of ingredients and instructions guaranteed to lead to happiness. Did you find yours?" He smiled. "I think I did." I turned to him. "But it wasn't the one they were trying to force on me. It's not the one that works for everyone. It's my own recipe that I created by trial and error." Ethan kissed me. "Sounds delicious. And the main ingredients?" I thought, the courage to be myself, love without conditions, work that brings joy, and the realization that true freedom is not when you get someone's approval, but when you don't need it anymore. We stood, embraced, and watched the lights of the city come on. I thought about my journey from a voiceless girl to a woman who had found her voice. About my family, complicated, imperfect, but still mine. About the man next to me who saw something in me that I hadn't noticed for a long time. It hasn't been a smooth journey. Some wounds will never fully heal. My father would remain a father, with all his flaws and his inability to openly express love. But I was no longer a prisoner of his expectations. I cooked my own recipe, lived by my own rules. And, most importantly, I learned to see the value in myself, not because someone else recognized it, but because I finally believed in myself. There were new restaurants ahead, new challenges, maybe even new conflicts with my family, but now I knew I could handle it. I had my own recipe for life, Imperfect, constantly adjusted, but absolutely my own.
Любі глядачі, дякую вам за перегляд, ставте лайки та підписуйтесь на канал. Також напишіть в коментарях, чи погоджуєтесь ви з Дженніфер, чи вона мала розказати все матері, чи ні, чи мала все розказати своєму коханцю щодо свого чоловіка, чи ні. І також прокоментуйте, чи вам сподобалось це відео.